Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And in our pre-chat, as we were getting to know each other, I'm not going to like this person. We're not going to have any fun. But we're actually going to be talking about a very serious subject. And it's one of those things that I think so many people struggle with. And so, please join me in welcoming Patricia Honiotes to our program today. Honiotes, there, I said it right. So welcome, Patricia.
Thank you. And please call me Pat.
Pat, I love it. I love it, my dear. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will jump into this. So Pat Honiotes is an internationally known business coach, mentor, teacher, trainer, and author who enjoys seeing her clients and their businesses thrive. In private practice since 1980, Pat's passion is to support clients in becoming the nucleus of their own life. Pat holds a master's degree in counseling psychology, and she has taught and mentored students that run the gamut from preschool to special needs high school students to college psychology students to training doctors and psychologists in medical hypnoanalysis. So again, Pat, welcome.
Thank you. This is fun already.
I know.
Energy. This is awesome.
This is so much fun. So what we're going to be talking about are boundaries and telling people no, and all of those things that we really do find very difficult. But, I gave a little bit of your background, but tell us a little bit more about how you discovered that this is your passion in life.
This could take hours, but it's a journey, right?
Right.
And so to say that boundaries are my passion,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's part of a bigger passion, that nucleus of your own life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other thing, Deb, is that, I've been doing this stuff for 40 plus years.
Right.
And
you started when you were 4, we know.
I know. So thank you for mentioning that. And that's probably not too far from the truth. But with all the people I've worked with, especially in business,
mm-hmm.
when they got stuck,
mm-hmm.
and they had a hard time moving past something,
mm-hmm.
almost always comes down to them not being the nucleus of their life. And
mm-hmm.
what I mean by that is making them the center, the control center.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that always comes down to one of 3 or 4 factors. The main one being setting and honoring boundaries.
Right.
And the thing is, Deb, it's a piece of cake to set a boundary. I mean,
mm-hmm.
you can read my book and I give you step by step.
Right.
1, 2, 3,
right.
4, you do it.
Mm-hmm.
You got it, right? All
mm-hmm.
done. That's not where the problem comes in.
Right.
Problem comes in is honoring them.
Keeping those dang things.
Yes. And so knowing that that's such a key factor to however or what specific business I'm coaching in,
mm-hmm.
it's the same. It doesn't matter business.
Right.
It is so common to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so rarely addressed. I mean, you can get 10,000 books on boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the part that needs to be addressed is what comes after you set them.
Right.
And it's so key.
It is, because we think we have these good intentions, things happen and we think, we're going to, all these various things. And I think part of why this is going to be such a fun discussion today is, a year ago, everybody's world went topsy-turvy. And what happened was so many people, and I think so many people still, and in the future, will be working from home, which really threw everything totally kerflumple. Now I've been home based for 20 years, but having my husband here has been very different. I know it's been very different for him to not be going in. So many people have kids at home now. So many people, had a parent maybe that had to come back. And so, having boundaries has become absolutely critical, both in your personal life and in your professional life. And let's be honest, we just, they just kind of all got munched together. And don't you love my terminology? We got kerfluffles, we got munched.
It does make sense to me.
I have all these technical words, right? And so, first tell us the title of your book, because it's a great book, but as we're recording this, it's not out. And so, of course, I'm drawing a blank on it.
Okay, so it's called Hold It Right There, and this is the picture that's on the front. So
right, got your hand up, you're stopping it.
Right, and it says how to say no without feeling guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing, then you can take control of your life instead of your life controlling you.
Right.
That's really what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, okay, let's start with the basics. What is a boundary?
Again, we can go to the dictionary and come up with all these wonderful,
right.
My definition of a boundary is it's the line in the sand that you draw under any circumstances that aren't honoring you, and you go, hold it right there.
Right.
Here's the line. You just crossed it. Here's your warning. Now back off.
Right.
And that sounds pretty aggressive, but it's not intended that way. You can say, hold it right there. You step over the boundary.
Right. And you can be, excuse me, darling. You could be Southern.
And then, the other thing about that, Deb, is it's going to depend on the circumstances.
Right.
Now, how many times you've had to say it to the same person, right? We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But yeah, a boundary is simply, for our purposes here, it's a line in the sand. You've crossed it, and here's what we're going to do about it.
Right. And clearly there are times where that boundary is firm. It is hard. It is not set in the sand. It is a wall. It is a barricade. And obviously the primary one with that is regarding sex. No means no. No, we're that's just, and you do discuss that in your book, because that is a boundary that people, set and unfortunately it gets crossed, and so, but that is obviously a topic for a different day. But, we do have, I think the problem is, and especially with women, and I'd be interested, especially, since you've been a practitioner for so long, are women worse at letting our boundaries get pushed because we just want to please people? Or, is it kind of, both sexes and we just don't realize it with men?
I'm going to say probably they're worse, but not to a real great extent.
Right.
And it's due because, the patriarchy, all of that we're now just learning about. So, all right, I'm 73. So I was raised in all of that to where
Right.
Yes.
Harriet told Ozzy, yes, sir. We'll do what you want, sir.
You got it. And so now it's about overcoming that. But as far as the males that I've worked with, they've got boundary issues too, but they won't admit it.
Right. Because it might not be manly, or who knows.
Or they don't see it as that.
Right.
My husband was a physician, and I was his office manager, right? And my boundaries are pretty, they're pretty there. And he didn't get it. We had a gal that would come in late, and he said, "Oh, just leave her alone. Just leave her alone." We go, "No,
it's her. It's just how she is."
Yeah, no, and that's not okay. The key there is, I would tell her, you've got one more, and we're going to have to get rid of you.
Right.
The difference is he still didn't see that as a boundary, but he came in one day when it was inconvenient for him. She wasn't there, and when she walked in, he fired her on the spot.
Oh no!
But the thing,
she was like, "What the heck?"
You got it. And I'm not saying all men are that way. I'm just saying that my experience has been they're less likely to identify things as a boundary issue.
Right. And articulate them, because of course that is, that's one of the biggest things too, is we have to be able to say either in our brain, at least, depending on what the boundary is, or say it to a person or whoever. Here is what the boundary is. And a physician is a great example to, for them to say, if you are later than 15 minutes, your appointment will be rescheduled.
Exactly.
Then you have to hold to that. It can't be 20 minutes. It can't be, oh, she's always late, so we just kind of work her into the schedule. No, and because once we know we can push boundaries, we push those boundaries and we push them as far as they can go, right?
All you have to do is give in once,
Mm-hmm.
and you're done.
Right. And a big part of it is, as we've been saying, communication. And so maybe what that boundary is, but if you tell somebody, oh my gosh, here's a picture of traffic, I am stuck in traffic, is it really okay if I can come a little bit late? If not, I'll reschedule. Then people are good with that, but if it's just, I'm just not going to let them know and show up whenever, that's fine. That's where those boundaries get pushed. But yeah, it's that communication.
And it has to be communication with self first.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You have to know your own freaking boundaries,
right,
before you can speak them. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people don't until they're pushed,
Mm-hmm.
and then they don't know what to do about it. Did that make sense?
Right. It did. Yeah. There's, we let it go. We let it go. And then usually it's a tiny little thing crosses that line, jumps over that little line in the sand, and we blow, right?
Yeah.
Because all those little things built up, but because we never recognized it in our own heads or articulated it, it was let's go with another little thing. It was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah. And sometimes something comes up that you maybe even never realized you even needed a boundary around.
Right.
I mean, it would never, until someone came in to my apartment as my guest, of course, and was mean to my dog. It never occurred to me that I would have to, all right. And so in the moment I'm going, oh no, that doesn't work here.
Right.
But it's also important to be aware of those things. There's things that'll pop up and you're like I was almost in shock. I was like, what?
Yes.
What? And then quickly you have to, but that's also a way for us to give ourselves a little bit of a break. Sometimes we're surprised by me.
Right.
Why would you have to set a boundary for that?
But, yeah, because we all think, well, that's common sense. Why would anybody think about doing that? And then they do it and you're like, what the heck? Where'd that come from?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And business is, of course, one of those things where we have to have boundaries. And it was so interesting when we moved from Colorado to Atlanta. We changed 2 time zones. So all of a sudden things got really, really wonky. And my clients were used to communicating with me on Colorado time. And I mean, I literally had not unpacked my computer when one of my clients who was in California, so 3 hours difference, contacted me and said, why are you not reading my emails? I emailed you earlier today. And I said, okay, computer box. And then of course we figured out that the time difference was going to be a serious problem. So we had what I called a come to Jesus meeting.
Yeah.
And I said, I still keep regular hours, basically 8 to 5 in my time zone. And I said, I won't respond to your emails that come in at 7:30 at night, but I also won't expect you to respond to emails that you might get at 4:30 in the morning, your time. And we all went, okay, that works.
You just had there a great demonstration of something that I promote tons, Deb, is the changing of the rules talk.
Right.
It was okay then, but something has shifted. And so you freaking communicate about it. People don't and say, okay, look, this has changed. And the time zone was a good example of that. Another can be, you've discovered that, I'm just not my best with clients at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So I'm going to change that and start at 9. But it's also critical then that you communicate with your clients and say, look, I know this, but here's the changing of the rules talk. We've been doing it this way. I've let it go. And now, so that was a great example. I love that.
Right. Yeah. And we mentioned COVID and the pandemic and the fact that everybody's now at home. And, one of the things that I discovered, now I started my business 25 years ago, so I've been home based for quite a long time. And of course, what I discovered way back then was people thought, oh, you're available 24/7.
Yes.
Right. And so now all of these people who all of a sudden are home based are finding the exact same thing, that, their boss might be up at 9 o'clock at night. He's going to email them. Now, he still might have emailed them, but when they were in the office, that was when they responded. But now they're at home, and the boss is expecting them to respond at 9 o'clock at night. And so those boundaries obviously have to be set. Now, there's always emergencies, and when I give my clients the boundary lecture about when I'm going to respond, I always tell them, more than happy to respond evenings, weekends, and holidays. However, you need to know that the price doubles. And they all discovered it could wait.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? You also bring up a good thing there. And you said you've always been home based for 20 years. I have two beyond that even. This is about honoring your own boundaries.
Right.
Because here's the thing. When you honor your own boundaries, nobody else has a choice.
Right.
It's a done deal. Their choice is to honor the boundary or take the repercussions you've already set up.
Right. Yeah. If I'm going to tell them they can't email me, then I shouldn't be reading my emails at 10:30 at night.
Well, you can read them if you want to,
but don't respond.
Exactly. But here, I'm going to carry that one a step farther since you brought it up, Deb, is honor those boundaries for yourself.
Right.
You don't need to be reading emails at 10:30 at night.
Right. I should be sleeping, watching TV, reading a book, doing something besides reading business emails.
Yeah. That's called taking care of yourself and being the nucleus of your own life.
Right. And I think that is probably the biggest struggle for people is, because we, especially, from a professional standpoint, we don't want to be missing out on clients. We want to respond to the boss. I mean, all of these various things. So, that is why it's so difficult to do this. But tell us, walk us through how we have, those discussions in a polite and respectful way, because it's not, you can't email me at 10:30 at night. How do we do this in a way that is respectful?
I think you've already demonstrated that with what you talked about earlier. This person can email you at 10:30 at night, but you already said very respectfully to this client, but know that I'm not going to answer you there. The only time I'm going to answer is between the hours in my time zone.
Right.
That was a very respectful setting of boundary, and you were about it. It's just this is the way it is, sweet cheeks, right?
Right.
So you did it beautifully.
Now, how do you do it with a boss? Because, again, I think we've got so many people who are now working from home. My husband was told he's not going back into the office till at least July. And my guess is he's going to be doing a hybrid, and he's certainly, far from special in this regard. I think many companies, they're going to discover that they didn't need to be paying rent on all of that space. This is great. They're getting a lot of work done once they figured out those initial boundaries, right? I think companies are going to go, whoa, we like this,
I agree with you. I agree.
And so how is this working?
It's called communication, and it's called talking about it to the boss, which means you have to be able to stand in your power, not from an aggressive or an abusive way, but standing it and setting boundaries will help you do that, by the way, is standing in your own power and saying, look our contract is from 9 to 5. And at 5 o'clock, I turn my computer off. So I'm not going to be getting your emails and texts until the next morning. That's one way to approach it. And another one is to say, hey, dude, this is family time from 6 o'clock on or 5. And if it's an emergency by my standards,
right,
then you can contact me. But I can tell you, I'm not going to respond. Now, again, it's going to depend on the situation. It's going to depend on your agreements with them, that whole 9 years. But the entire key there is conversation.
Right.
communication. That's where things fall down. That's when all this inner stuff comes up. I can't talk to my boss that way.
Right.
Or I can't.
Right. He's my boss. He might fire me. My clients, they might fire me. Ooh.
And sometimes you have to be okay with that.
Right.
And now that's not said lightly. Okay.
Right. Well, but let's be honest. I mean, if they're going to push some things like that, and especially on a regular basis, obviously there are emergencies, or, it's the guy that's like, oh my gosh, I forgot it was 10:30 at night, when I emailed you, or things like that. But, if they're going to push there, they're going to push in other ways.
Yes.
And, and so it might not be a bad thing to say, this is not working out.
Yes.
Yay, see, we love this. We just solved all the problems of the world. And, and it's that way with personal life also. If those boundaries are continually pushed, then, there's obviously things, from a business perspective, you might need mediation. From a personal perspective, mediation, counseling, all of these various things. But yeah, I mean, if it's, if you're continually thinking, I don't like this, do you really want to live like that?
Well, but yeah. But here's the thing. I want to go back to bosses just for a second. Is my experience has been when you work with someone and help them approach their boss, they're many times surprised at the receptivity of their boss.
Right.
We make up all this stuff that may not be.
Yeah. You say, hey, I don't want you to email me after 6. They're like, okay. And you're like, well, but I had all these arguments. I had all of this. I was so prepared for this conversation, and you went, okay.
Yeah. And part of that, how do I want to say this? We're talking about boundaries, but that's really only surface stuff.
Right.
All the stuff that comes around that, it involves a lot of personal inner work.
Right.
And you have to be willing to do that to make the boundaries easier.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a self-esteem issue. It's feeling good or bad about yourself. I mean, there's many things that do have to come first before we can start doing that, or at the same time, or, all those various things.
And a lot of business people don't want to go here when I start talking about the inner work that goes with boundaries. And a lot of times what I'll hear in response is, what has that got to do with my business? I just want to run.
Right. I sell widgets.
Yeah. What? I don't want to talk about all my personal stuff, but that's what's, it's a trickle down effect. And it does impact their business as well as their personal life.
Right.
But if you're doing business coaching, that often will come up. What does this got to do with it? Well, honey, let me tell you.
Right.
But there's a lot more work, like I said before, setting the boundary is a piece of cake. All right. Honoring it is another whole ball game. That's where the snafus start coming in.
Right. Because I mean, we do want to make people happy. I mean, that's for most of us. That's we enjoy that, and we certainly don't want to. Maybe it's not that we want to make them happy; it's that we don't want to make them unhappy, right? Because unhappy people are cranky people, and we don't want to deal with cranky people.
We don't have to deal with the consequences of them being unhappy.
Right. So we'll let them push those boundaries. And part of what I loved in your book was that you've got all of these worksheet type of things for people to work through, to really be thinking about, okay, what are my boundaries? And again, personal, professional, that combination, because we right now, and for months, and years, who knows, we are going to have to think about these things, and so it's, thinking about, okay, do we say, okay, my children are homeschooled, therefore I have to be able to be with them between 10 and noon. Yeah. That's just it. However, from a business perspective, that means I'm going to work 2 extra hours somewhere. So it's setting boundaries can entail compromise. There's not anything wrong with that.
No, it has to at times. And it's not about, this is the boundary.
Right.
because that's going to get you nowhere.
Right. Especially if you're dealing with a 6-year-old,
60-year-old.
Right. Right.
Yeah. It has to have compromise, or at least willingness to compromise.
Right.
That might not be ideal, but at least it's something you can work with. And quite frankly, there are those rare times when it's not possible, and that's when you part ways.
Right.
And people have to be aware up front that can be a result of setting and honoring your boundaries.
Right.
I talk more about honoring your boundaries because that's where the juice is. That's what makes it work.
Right. And let's remember, it's a two-way street. If I'm setting boundaries, then they need to be able to set boundaries too. So back to the kids at home. So they're going to say, hey mom, hey dad, I really need you to spend an hour with me. Maybe it's that bedtime hour, and all those things. I mean, so I'm an only child, and I don't know why I just thought of this, but one of the things, my father was, he worked a lot. I mean, his job was basically a 24/7 job. He was in law enforcement. And so he was gone a lot, but when he was home, he read me a book before I went to sleep.
There you go.
Now, he only had, a very basic 8th grade education. So, it wasn't long before, we kind of bypassed, but I still remember that time. I mean, obviously, this was many years ago but and I remember some of the books. Misty of Chincoteague, right? One of these, she was this horse, right? But that was one of his things, was when I am home, now, the funny thing is, I don't know whose boundary it was. And I'm calling it a boundary, but it also might be a rule, right? I don't know if mom said you're doing this, or if my dad said, but of course, clearly my dad enjoyed it, or he would have said, no, we're not going to do it. But yeah, it was, and that was just kind of one of those hard and fast rules that, he was going to read to me for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. And, and because it usually wasn't terribly long, but it was our time. And I think we need to remember, kids need that. And so, we need to honor them when they're saying, you know what, I need a little bit of time with you.
And it's important, sometimes there's some confusion between boundaries and rules, and I don't know that I have a clear.
Right. They kind of mishmash together.
It's kind of a thing like that, but it's also then the ability of your dad to have been able to say, no, I can't go have a beer with you at 8:00 tonight. You have to wait until 8:30.
Right. Yeah.
And being willing, again, is being willing to have his buddy not abundantly pleased with him.
Right.
Now, here's the other thing. Talk about working at home and kids. Like I said, I've worked at home forever, and I do a lot of calls during the day from all over the place.
Right.
And my daughter used to always have an emergency when I was on a call.
Mommy, right?
So we had a little come to Jesus talk, and I said, before I jump on a call, my commitment to you is I'm going to, like 10 minutes before, is there anything you need? I'm going to be on the call for the next 3 hours or whatever it is. And that's your only chance. The only way you get to knock on the door is if you're bleeding from the head.
Yes.
And she didn't necessarily like it because, of course, when you're 14, everything's an emergency, right?
Right.
Setting those kind of boundaries for yourself too, for the kids' sake, and reading that story, but also making sure that you're on track professionally and not having interruptions. Right. Just some examples.
Right. And speaking of example, you're setting a good example for her to know that she can set those boundaries.
Yeah. And you know what? She's picked up on it. She manages a chain restaurant very close to Atlanta. And I want to tell you, I visited there a couple of times, and very calmly, people know where they stand, know what the boundaries are.
Right.
She has almost zero staff problems.
Wow.
Because, it's not zero, but
right.
It's low. It's really because she's clear about her boundaries and she honors them.
Right. Yeah. And that's the other thing. You have to honor it yourself. If you're telling your staff, your employees, I expect you to be here at 9:00 starting work, not getting your coffee, not wandering into your desk, you're starting work at 9 o'clock, then you have to do it too, right? Because we've all had those bosses that came strolling in late. Now they might be working at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, so in their mind, but yeah, if my boss is telling me that he expects me or she expects me to be working at 9 o'clock, then they'd better be there working at 9 o'clock too.
The other thing too is, in terms of that, is communicating with your staff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll say to my assistant, I'm going to be late starting today.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't. So it's that communication.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's all about the communication ahead of that. And the compromise.
Mm-hmm.
Right. She said to me a couple of times, I know you can't be here can you at least be here by 10 till, because we have some things we have to go through. There's that communication and negotiation with mutual respect.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key to all of this, is mutual respect.
Mm-hmm. Right. And again, whether it's personal or professional, there is all of that, and it has to be there, and it's mutual. It is that two-way street. If I have somebody who tells me, this is what my boundary is, then I have to respect it, or maybe question it. It was interesting. I was on a call yesterday with several people, and this young woman said she's not an email fan. She just doesn't like email, and she said, but more importantly, she does not open. Now, I of course went when she said this. She does not open, so she's not even tempted with it, her email program until 3 p.m. So she never checks email before 3. She said, now she makes it incredibly clear to everyone that is the way it is. And at the same point, she also tells them, I prefer to be communicated with via text. And of course, what happens is that makes it shorter, that makes it quicker and faster. And she said, clearly she has to have email. People are sending her contracts, they're sending her all these things that you can't do via text. But she said, I just tell people, I don't even open the program until 3 o'clock. And so she sets that boundary. She expects them to keep it.
And she has to then too.
Right. Yeah.
That's the whole key. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Because if I'm, say I'm communicating with her and I mean, so I send the email just so I don't forget. Okay, I'm going to send the email. But if she responds at 10 a.m., I'm like, ooh.
I know when to get her. Right? I know when I can get her in person. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so it comes back to that. But, it's so interesting. And, as I was reading your book, one of the things that I was thinking about were tools, that we can use to help us with these boundaries. And my first thought was, your calendar, and it's interesting. I have a friend, his name is Brian Basilico. A lot of people, he's been on the program several times. A lot of people know that we've done a lot of things together, and he has his office calendar, and 3 times a day he has an hour blocked out, or maybe it's 30 minutes, but he has time blocked out to walk the dog. Now, he has to walk the dog. It's not like the dog can sit there with their little legs crossed and go, okay, I can wait. But he almost never, ever will schedule something during that time. But because he's got it in his calendar and has it blocked out for months, I mean, it is there. He's not tempted to put something over it. He doesn't have anybody else who puts something over it. It's just set in stone. And I mean, a great example of that are when kids are in school, parents know I have to pick my kid up at 3. I can't show up at 5. I can't show up at 3:10. I have to pick my child up at 3 or have made other arrangements. So I think our calendars are great ways to set boundaries that we forget about.
Yeah. Here's the thing. It's also a way to take care of yourself. And I know that's not the topic today, but boundaries are taking care of you.
Yes, it is most definitely taking care of yourself physically and mentally.
And spiritually and emotionally, and all that stuff.
Right.
So put in a doggone lunch hour.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Even if it's a half hour. I work so much with, I'll just eat when I eat. Yeah. And that serves you how, and that serves your clients how.
Right.
And absolutely put in 15-minute breaks a couple of times a day.
Right.
Yeah, it's just important for all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, the more you do that,
Mm-hmm.
the more you're standing in your power and setting these boundaries and honoring them,
Mm-hmm.
the easier it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
And the more often you do it, to where you
Right.
got boundaries all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Which makes life
You know,
easy.
and like I use an online scheduling program, and which works fabulous. Aside from anything else, it eliminates all of that. Well, what about Tuesday at 2? Oh no, can't do Tuesday at 2. How about Thursday at 3? All those stupid emails that go back and forth. So I love an online scheduling program. There's free, there's paid, and so but one of the things in there is you set your hours. So I have mine set from 8 until 5. And that's really important because I have guests for this program. They have to use that program. They absolutely have to use that program to schedule their interview. And so, but I have guests from around the world. So it's critical that I have that so that, say someone in Australia isn't booking me in the middle of the night. And now again, you have to be flexible. I mean, there are times where people are telling me, oh my gosh, do you realize that's 5:30 in the morning for me? Okay, we're going to adapt. And so, again, that's one of those things that's set in pretty hard stone, but it can wiggle a little bit. But then it's also so important because it's tied to my Google Calendar. I absolutely, positively, 100% have to keep my Google Calendar up to date, because otherwise I'm going to have somebody scheduling something over a doctor's appointment, another meeting, or whatever.
Exactly. Funny story about that. It took my assistant 2 years to get me off of my paper calendar onto Google and Calendly and all of that. And now it's like my lifeline.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you can, while you can schedule over it, and I have to work with some people on that, the more you do it, the more you keep it up to date, the less likely you are to do that. Here's the reason why. Because you begin to have the experience of having that time, of having those boundaries, and doggone it, you can start getting, that feels pretty good. What? I really get a 15-minute here? So it's like you're self-reinforcing, okay? You're self-reinforcing your boundary and your self-worth and all the things that go along with that.
Right. Now, of course, this is all well and good, but what happens when we just don't have boundaries? And I'm not saying that we let everything just go willy-nilly and but it's, because we've been talking about a self-esteem issue, things like that. So what happens if we're just kind of one of those where it's like, okay, fine.
Well, first of all, I would question if that's really true. Someone says that to me and I say, okay, I get that on a conscious level, and you want to be a really nice person, and I'll just go with the flow and it's all okay. I want you to just check in for a moment and say, is it really okay?
Right.
Or are you trying to be nice? Are you trying not to have people get mad at you? Are you trying not to have to, here's another big thing, are you trying not to have the feelings you have by not being nice? Feelings come in here so
back
much.
to that guilt thing. Oh my gosh.
Guilt and also beating up on yourself. It's part of guilt, right? And I forgot the question because I got off on a tangent, so I apologize. But do you remember the question, Deb?
What was the question? That's all right. It was about just going willy-nilly and not having boundaries.
If you can do that and have a successful life, have a successful business, one in which you're complete, you're content, I'm not going to judge that. But as soon as, and I usually work with people that don't have boundaries, but as soon, I don't need a boundary like that. Okay. But as soon as you come to me with, what's not working is my paper doesn't get out on time. And I go, and why do you suppose that is? So as long as things are working, if you can do that, great.
Right.
Tanya, all right? So I have no judgment about that. I just question it when somebody tells me that. And not from a judgmental place. I just want you to make sure. Go inside and make sure that's really, really, really okay. Is it really, really, you mentioned earlier, well, that's just her. She's always late. is it really okay with you if your friend is always late meeting you for dinner? Is it really okay?
Right. Have you started telling them a half hour earlier because you know they're going to be a half hour late?
Yeah. And see, that's manipulative stuff that doesn't work. Okay. It's because it doesn't work inside of you. So it's really about getting flat out, sort of truth, honest with yourself. Am I just going along to get along? And that's where some of the hard work can come in. It doesn't have to be hard.
Right. And it is, it's a complicated process. And you mentioned the friend that always runs late. We all have those, right? And many of us, we just kind of,
I really don't have those kinds of friends.
Yeah. And it's funny. I have my mother, bless her, is one of those that's always early.
Yes.
And now it's okay to be 5 minutes early, but when it's, I tell her, Mom, you're not going to get there a half hour early. The doctor won't probably see you if you're there a half hour early. I remember a discussion I had with my dad one time, and he passed away many, 10-ish years ago. I can never remember those dates. But he lived a long life, but he was so funny. We're in a doctor's office one time and we got in there early. And part of the reason we did that was traffic. I mean, all those various things. And I do try to get somewhere a smidge early. I mean, I don't want to be that rude person, but we got there and we were there really early. I mean, like half hour at least. And it was a doctor's appointment. And he really could not understand why we were still sitting there. And he very loudly was not understanding why we were just sitting there. It's like, well, Dad, our appointment's not until noon and it's only 11:15. And then it was, well, what the hell are we doing here so early? And it's like, oh, Dad.
But there's the doctor's office honoring the boundaries.
Right.
They're just everywhere. Everywhere.
Right.
And we assume things. And that's what we can get.
All those stories we tell ourselves.
Yes. And that's what runs right up against boundaries as well. Well, I'm going to go early. They'll take me. I know they will. Well, that's a big assumption. And you know what they say about assumptions.
Right.
And so again, it's about getting really clear of, are you thinking accurately? Are you thinking honestly before you're making those decisions?
Right. Yeah. Say you're there early. Okay, that's great because you might have been thinking, okay, I don't know what traffic's going to be doing. I mean, all those various things. But that's where you do things like have a book, play on your phone, whatever it is. So you're still respecting their time. Anytime I get somewhere early, I tell them, my appointment's not until 5. I know I'm here early and I go and I sit in the corner. And the really funny thing is
they take you early.
Yes. Because if they can, because you were nice and you were polite and you were saying, you know what, I know that I'm early. So please, I'm fine with that. Now, I spend an awful lot of time in doctor's offices. I'm one of those children. And so, I've been known, and it's funny because my oncologist, that's the doctor I see an awful lot of. She always runs late. Just always runs late. Okay. I'm not one of those that she's always running late. So I'm going to be late too, because, she might actually be on time and then it's going to totally screw stuff up. But, I will let it go so far. And then I go up. And I remember one time I was at the doctor's office and it was just for treatment, which normally you get taken back in pretty quickly. Yeah. And, at 30 minutes of sitting in the waiting room, I went up and I said, excuse me. They don't normally run this late. Is there an issue? And she said, well, yeah, or no, I put your name in. Now I could see my chart. It was still laying on her desk. She had not put my name up.
Yeah, see, that's when.
Yeah. And so I didn't, I did the, I didn't want to confront, but I kind of, yeah. And so she did, she went and put my chart up. She didn't apologize, didn't do anything. But then they were still even later to take me back. And so it was about an hour. And then I went up and I said, this is not acceptable. Now they know they've got me over a barrel. I have to have that treatment. and I have to have it at a certain time, and all those various things. So it's not like I could say I'm coming back, but I finally went back in, and they had truly had an emergency. I mean, they had somebody who had anaphylactic shock. And so it was holy schmoly, flurry scurry, all these various things. But back to communication. If somebody had come out and said, oh my gosh, folks, we need to tell you we're running late, we've had an emergency, we would have all gone, okie dokie. But I get those little comment forms, and I filled it out that time. And the next time I was in, they apologized.
Yeah, good. You said something that struck a spark in me a couple of minutes ago, Deb, and that was when I didn't want to confront. And so you waited a half an hour.
Right. Yeah.
I would invite you and invite our listeners to take a different perspective on the word confront.
Right. Because that's a negative.
No, it's not. When you think about, that's already but if you think about it in terms of, I'm going to go up and ask them what the delay is. You can do that at 15 minutes.
Right.
That's kind of my but it changes how you feel about it, which is important. In that way, you're more likely to take action earlier. Okay. And it's you putting a stake in the ground for yourself, which is what boundaries are all about.
Right.
But if you can ask them about it and leave that C word out, because you're right, that word immediately conjures up in your face.
Yes, I'm making the one eyebrows going up, right?
Versus, can you tell me what the slow up is? Right. Or should I, or whatever that is. And see, and I realize that I get picky with words like that because we use words that is the way we think about it.
Right.
And if we can just take another perspective on that, man, it's so much easier to do stuff.
Right. And there are obviously ways to be confronting and still be polite about it. Going up and saying, excuse me, it seems to be running a little bit late today. That is confronting, but we're doing it differently than what the heck is going on. And so that's where I think it's so important is, now you do get more flies with honey than with vinegar. But there are times where you need that vinegar. Let's be honest. There are just times where it's like, now we're not, it was like we were saying before, you reach that point, you hit that edge and was like, no, the straw that broke the camel's back was it went over an hour late or, whatever it was.
So here's the thing about that. I agree with you. There are times when, here's the point. Here's the boundary, right? But here's the other thing about it. Instead of just letting it go and letting it go and letting it go, is to say something the very first time.
Right. Yeah. Don't let it go to the hour. Say it at 15 minutes.
And so and that's with anything, whether I don't like the fact that you put your shoes on my couch, right? And I say, please don't do that. Because by the 10th time you've done it, I'm ready to choke you.
Yeah. You went, you got the baseball bat.
and then it's like a blow up that doesn't feel good to either one of us. And while it can seem like, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I ran my husband's office, and the staff there really thought I was kind of bitchy because I called them on stuff in the moment, and people aren't used to that and not in a rude way.
Right.
But the truth about that, then, Deb, is it never built up into that explosion.
Yeah. Yeah. If you said, I noticed you were 10 minutes late today, then probably they're not going to be 10 minutes late again. But if it was 10 minutes for 3 or 4 weeks, like, when your husband went in and just fired her, she's like, hey, you never said anything to me. But yeah, that's the thing.
How you feel inside about yourself.
Right.
You're standing in your integrity. You're walking your talk. Right. Rather than doggone it, and then it happens. You're not feeling good about yourself either.
Right. Well, and we've been mentioning health, when it reaches that, our blood pressure's gone up, we may have given ourselves an ulcer. All these various things because we let all this fester. And, and so, yeah, why not deal with it when you can still be nice and polite and say, please don't put your shoes on my couch, and they're going to go, oh my gosh, I hadn't realized I had done that.
Yeah, exactly.
If they leave their feet there, okay, that's the baseball bat time.
Yeah. It's just so much. I'm a big fan of easy, by the way. It's just so much easier in the moment and down the road.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we do, but it is hard to set the boundaries, and then it's hard to keep those boundaries. So we've got about 10 minutes left. How do we deal with this? Because now, here's the other thing. I mean, when I read the title of your book, I mean, it's saying no, that's the other problem that I have now. I'm getting much better about it. Somebody says, hey, Deb, we want you to do X. Okay. When I really wanted to say no.
Okay, so I have an exercise for you.
Okay.
And I want you to
I should have said no, but no.
I want you to promise me that you'll do this at least for 30 days. And you can decide after that whether or not you want to continue. I think you'll want to because it works. It makes life easier, right? So when you get up in the morning and you're brushing your teeth and you're looking in the mirror, here's what I would like you to do. I would like to look right into your eyes, just like this, and go, no.
And the world didn't stop.
And the second part of that is during the day, then say no as many times as you can. I don't mean just don't walk around saying no.
No.
Can I have an appointment at 10:30? No.
Right. Even if they can, you need this practice.
Yes. But do that internally. And then you say, oh, wait a minute, there is an opening. But if it's like, I don't know, somebody, Mom, can I have a cookie? No. Even though 15 minutes later or whatever, you can say, you know what? I just finished the cookies, have one. Legit, where you can use a legitimate no. Practice on things, Deb, that don't matter so much.
Right.
Can I call you in 5 minutes? No, but you can call me in 15. Because 10 minutes really probably doesn't make a whole lot.
Right.
It's that thing in the morning to where you can look straight in your eyes and practice saying no.
Right.
And if you're really doing that with that, it's going to bring up some turmoil inside. Just a little twitch. And the whole thing there is the world didn't stop, but you also lived through it.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing, is for us to realize we can do this and survive.
Right. And it's like the saying says, no means no. We have dogs. Now we have very ill-behaved dogs, partially because we'll say no. And of course they knew that the first no wasn't real. So the 15th no is not going to be real either. And I'm sure the same thing goes for people who have kids. When you tell them no, they're like, okay, whatever. and then of course, by the time you reach the 15th, you're screaming at them and they're like, okay, fine. The first no needed to be the real no.
Well, it's not only that, it's not only saying that first no, it's you honoring the first no.
Right. Yeah. Stop saying no. No.
I said no. And if you ask me again, you're not going to have cookies for 3 days.
Right.
And when then the second time they ask you, put the cookies away for 3 days. Now, these are silly examples.
But it works.
But here's the other thing is when you say no, have a follow-up repercussion for not honoring your boundary.
Right.
That's the key.
No cookies for you.
Yeah.
I love it.
Your life.
I love it. Well, oh my gosh, Pat, speaking of boundaries, we kind of have that time boundary thing coming up. This is why I set a timer, because we could continue with this forever. Because it's I think something that is so important to people, especially now, as we've got all of this that's going on. And it's a variety of things, it can be things like, I'm not going to discuss politics, period.
Yes.
I'm going to turn Facebook off. I'm going to get off Facebook now. I'm not, but I'm just not going to go there. I'm not going to watch the news. I'm going to take a walk every day. I mean, all of these various things. And so, I want everybody to be thinking about, and, as we said, your book has great worksheets, but if you don't have the book, be thinking about these things. What are your boundaries? And, again, what are ones that, okay, this one is concrete. This one's quicksand. This one is, it's kind of, we got a lot of wiggle room with it. But because we have those, right? They're, dinner at 6, dinner at 6:30. Okay. Dinner at 8. No, but yeah, so, be thinking about those things. So in the meantime, Pat, tell people how how you work with folks.
I work with folks on a one-on-one basis. Okay. I also do.
Now, can you do virtual now since this is a virtual life?
I do all virtual. Yeah.
Okay.
I also do some group work about setting and honoring boundaries.
Okay.
And what that entails is, it's easy to set the boundary, but getting support when you're not setting it really. So that's what that's all about. You can go to my website. It's pathoniotes.com. And there's all sorts of opportunities there to work with me. If you're really interested in just boundaries, I don't know for sure when the next class will be, but it's pathoniotes.com/boundaries. Cool. And I'll take you and give you a whole explanation of that.
Right.
And then there's ways on my website, pathoniotes.com, that you can contact me. And I do, my assistant can set up a 15-minute strategy call with you to see if this is really what you want to learn, and I'm the person to work.
Because it's kind of like AA. If you're not ready to be making these changes, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and you set up an appointment with someone you've never met, and you get on and think, wow, what did I do to myself? In 15 minutes, you can probably determine whether or not my style is going to suit you.
Right.
To this interview, I mean, you get a pretty good sense of it, right? But yeah, all of those ways. So there's a phone number, there's a way to, all on the website.
I love it. And your last name is spelled Honiotes. So the website is PATHONIOTE. Did I spell it wrong?
It's PAT. No, you started it and I was going for an email and I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Yes, please continue.
Okay, so website is PATHONIOTES.com, and then everything is there.
Yes.
Perfect. I love it. Well, this has been wonderful, and and it's funny. As you get older, you get better at setting these boundaries. I think. That said, I have met some absolutely delightful millennials and Gen Zs. I think that's the younger one, who are really good at this. I love it. I love talking with them because they're so good at it. And that's probably come from having parents who were good at setting boundaries. But, it's something that we can all make changes in. I think probably we all, can be working at this and thinking about these things. And so do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
I actually have just two.
Okay.
And what I would like you to keep in mind is that when you honor the boundary that you've set, no one else has a choice. And so that's the power in that you have for yourself. And the other one is the boundaries are really important because you can't give what you don't have. And what I mean by that is unless you're satisfied and have your time frames in control and all of that, you're not going to be able to give to your clients what you're there to give them and that you want to give them. So that would be my closing two thoughts.
I love it. And what a great way to end. I am Deb Creer. I've been having an absolutely fascinating discussion. Can't wait to do it again with Pat Honiotes. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.